This lesson is about creating geometry while working in an assembly. The first method, inserting a new component, allows you to reference existing geometry while creating new geometry, and also borrow geometry edges and faces to construct your new geometry. If the external references toggle is clicked, the borrow geometry will create links and maintain the references with changes. If it is cleared, reference geometry is still created, but the geometry does not keep pace with the changes. The second method, make component, lets you build geometry using sketches, sketch features, and fillets, just like working in a part, and make components from that geometry by converting it. First, let's discuss some terminology. Components. A component can be a part with a single solid body, a part with multiple bodies, or an assembly. When an assembly is inserted, it is considered a subassembly. Let's discuss an important aspect of working in context: editing and focus. By default, when you open or create an assembly, the focus is on the parent or top level component, the first one listed. With the focus on it, it's active and can be edited. But any of the components can be edited. If you double-click the component name in the Design Manager, it will set the focus to that component and activate it. The active component has a white background, all the others are gray. You'll see a change in the work area too. The active component retains its color and all the rest are transparent. To return to having the parent or top level component active, double-click the name at the top of the design tree. You can also activate one component directly from another. An alternative way to activate a component is to click or right-click a component in the Design Manager or graphically in the work area and click Edit. First, I'll create a new component that will become the assembly. It is created in the same way as any other component. xDesign does not distinguish between single body parts, multi-body parts, or assemblies until later in the process. Next, we will add an existing part component using Insert on the assembly section of the action bar. This method uses the 3D search capability to help you find the component that you want. This includes different preview, sort, and thumbnail view options. After selecting the housing, we'll click OK and it will be added. The planes of the inserted component are coincident with the planes of the assembly, and as the first component added, it is fixed in place without any mates. This is represented by the anchor symbol in the Design Manager. Note that any component can be toggled from fixed to float, or the reverse, by right-clicking on it and changing the setting. Expanding the component in the Design Manager shows all of the sketches and features that make up that component. The first component we'll create in the context of the assembly will be the round cover plate. It will cover the mounting hole with the same boss and hole diameters and the matching hole pattern. I want the references that I create to remain in place if the source component changes size. So the first thing that I'll do is click External References on the Assembly section of the action bar. Next, I'll click New Component. This creates a new, but empty, component in the active assembly. The only visual difference is the addition of a new physical product in the Design Manager. The active assembly I mentioned in the last step is defined as the one that is currently being edited, or the one in focus. Now, by default, it's the component that was created to start this lesson. Another way to describe it is as the top level component in the tree, the main assembly. In order to work on the new component, I'll need to activate that component. The procedure is very direct. Just double-click the component in the Design Manager. As expected, there is nothing in the expanded component other than the default 3 planes, but the existing geometry is now transparent and the background of the component in the Design Manager is white. To create geometry in the new part, I'll follow the same sequence of steps I do in a part, and that begins with a sketch. First, I'll change to the Sketch action bar and click Create or Edit Sketch. Then I'll click the face of the boss from the housing component. The act of selecting a face from another component creates an external reference. Within the component, you'll see an External References folder with that reference, Surface.1. We'll create external references to edges of the housing model using Convert Entities. We'll select a face, which converts all the edges of the face to sketch geometry. You can also select individual edges. The conversion has generated more geometry than we need, so the options are to delete it or convert it to construction geometry. The inner concentric circle would create a hole in the center of the extruded cover, so I'll select it and click Construction Line. Note that another way to create an external reference is to use the Up to Geometry end condition with an extrude. The last step is to extrude the sketch and create a solid body. I'll change to the Features action bar and click Extrude. Any construction geometry is ignored, so the preview shows a circular plate with 4 holes in a circular pattern. The geometry matches that of the boss under it. Extrude the sketch 5 mm and click OK. The geometry of the component is now visible, and it is opaque, not transparent, like the rest of the geometry. Now, I want to make the top level assembly active again. The procedure is the same. Double-click the top level assembly name in the Design Manager. This activates the assembly and returns to the default setting you see when you create or open an assembly. Note the color changes in the Design Manager and in the work area. Lastly, I'll rename the new component Cover by clicking the 3 dots and retyping. Let's test the external references by making a change to the source component, the housing. I'll double-click the housing to make it active and double-click the sketch of the circular boss feature. I'll change it from 75 to 95 mm and exit the sketch. Next, I'll return to the top level assembly, but there is no immediate change. To force the change, I'll click Solve. Lastly, I'll rename the assembly Housing Assembly. The second component we'll create in the context of the assembly will be the base plate beneath the housing. This time we'll build the geometry as if we were creating a part, referencing the existing geometry as needed. After we're done, we'll use Make Component to convert the part geometry into an assembly component. This time we're creating, but not maintaining the references, so let's toggle External References off. On the underside of the housing, let's start a new sketch from the Sketch action bar. The view is oriented normal to the selected face, but it may be reversed. If it is, press N to flip it to the other normal direction. Sketch a rectangle and fully define it by adding 25 mm dimensions to the edges of the housing. Note that a sketch and isolated external references have been added to Design Manager at the top of the tree. Next, I'll extrude the rectangle 10 mm away from the housing and click OK. Change to a top view and we can see that there are 2 mounting tabs built into the housing. We'll need to create matching holes. I'll click on the top face of the extrusion and create a new sketch. The easiest way to create the circle of the same size and the same place as the hole is to use Convert Entities again. Click Convert Entities and select the edges of each hole. Create an extruded cut, end condition through one way, using both circles. I'll add in 10mm symmetric chamfers on the corners as well. Before we finish, let's see what components we have visually. I'll click on the housing and click Hide. I'll hide the cover next. Note that there is no other component, just features in the tree. Nevertheless, they are related features, and hiding any one feature hides them all. Show the components and the features. As the last step in the process of creating this component, I'll access the Assembly action bar and click Make Component. Next, clicking the Extrude.1 feature as the component feature finds all of the related features automatically and places them in the Related Features box. I'll add the name Plate and click OK. All of the features have been moved from the assembly level into the new component. Note that there is a Define Coordinate System option. If it is not used, the assembly origin is used.